All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You're prepping for your business analyst certification exam,
That's right.
and you're on day 5 of your course. So day 5, you're probably
Deep in it.
knee-deep in the Baybach Guide, all those knowledge areas, all
Yeah.
that good
Yes,
stuff.
absolutely right.
And we're diving into your day 5 materials.
Excellent.
You've even got a spreadsheet called, get this, Techniques Map, all KA's student version.xls.
It's a mouthful, but it's useful.
It's like a cheat sheet for the entire BA world. It's kind of awesome.
It is. It's a great way to kind of see everything laid out in front of you. You know, when you're prepping for an exam like this, it's so easy to get like stuck in the weeds and lose sight of the big picture. So this spreadsheet is going to help you do that.
Right, and it's not just about memorizing terms.
No.
We're going to make those concepts come alive, I think, a little bit today. We'll bring in some real-world examples and, of course, connect it back to your exam prep.
Absolutely. And we'll focus on the practical application because that's really what the exam is all about. It's not just about knowing the terms. It's about being able to apply them. So, for example, you've already encountered this, but the Business Analysis Core Concept Model, or the BACCM,
Right.
with its 6 key terms, changes, needs, solutions, stakeholders, value, and contexts. Now, you might be thinking, okay, 6 terms, got it.
Right.
But here's where it gets interesting. Imagine you're working on a project and the client's needs change midstream. Suddenly, the proposed solution doesn't quite fit anymore. You need to understand how that change kind of roars through the entire project, affecting stakeholders, value, and even the context itself.
Right.
So the BACCM helps you kind of analyze those ripple effects and adapt your approach.
So it's like if one thing changes over here, everything else is affected.
It is. It's not a domino effect.
Right.
But instead of dominoes, we've got these interconnected concepts.
Right. Okay, so that's a big takeaway from chapters 7 and 5 of the Baybach Guide, which are the focus of your day 5 materials.
Those are big chapters.
You are.
They are crucial.
Yeah. Okay, so speaking of like just little things that have happened so far,
Yeah.
do you remember the green checkmark challenge?
Oh, yes.
Remember that? Finding a checkmark image online using the snipping tool.
I love that one.
Now that might have seemed, I don't know, like kind of a random task at the time,
Right.
but
But it was testing your resourcefulness,
it really was.
which is a crucial skill for any BA.
And connecting the dots in a way that you don't always expect.
Yeah, a good BA needs to be able to find information,
Yeah.
use basic tech tools effectively, and think on their feet.
Okay, so let's look at the day 5 agenda.
All right.
So it starts with a review of previous concepts, which is good, you know.
Always good for reinforcement.
Yeah, always good. And then it's deep dive time into chapter 7 and 5,
Here we go.
the Baybach Guide. But before we get into all that,
Yes.
let's have some fun.
Okay.
Let's do a little pop quiz. A few questions straight from your course materials. Ready?
Hit me.
All right, first question. In what situation does an interview have all strengths without any challenges?
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's a bit of a trick question.
It is. It is a trick question. No elicitation technique is perfect.
Right.
So interviews have their strengths, like gaining in-depth insights from stakeholders, but they also have challenges. Think about those challenges. When might they be minimized so that those strengths can shine through?
Okay. Next question. The nature of requirements elicitation.
Okay.
This one's about understanding, you know, that core concept.
The essence of it.
Yeah.
Strip away all the jargon and just think, what am I trying to achieve when I'm eliciting requirements? What's the goal?
Okay, last one for now. Kanban and Scrum boards differences, mention few. Ooh, getting into the Agile realm.
Ooh.
Think about those key distinctions between Kanban and Scrum boards.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of each? How do they visualize and manage work differently?
Good questions.
All right, so after that quiz, your day 5 assignment involves a spreadsheet called Elements to KA Tasks Map.xls.
I love spreadsheets.
You'll be mapping specific knowledge areas based on first names. So it's
So it's collaborative.
collaborative, which is cool. Like Ayushi gets elicitation, Brian tackles requirements definition, etc.
Yeah, and that's a great way to kind of simulate how BAs work in the real world. You know,
Right.
projects are rarely solo endeavors. You're going to be collaborating with others,
Right.
dividing up tasks strategically.
Okay, so let's dive into chapter 7, the core concepts of business analysis. And this chapter introduces those 6 terms from the Business Analysis Core Concept Model, BACCM. They're not just random words. They're really the foundation of your work as a business analyst. Changes, needs, solutions, stakeholders, value, and contexts.
And they're all interconnected. You know, think about it like this. A change in a project's context, like, let's say, a new regulation, that could trigger a shift in stakeholder needs,
Okay.
leading to a reevaluation of the proposed solution and its value.
Right.
So the BACCM gives you that framework
Okay.
to analyze all these interconnected elements and make those informed decisions.
So it's kind of like, if you push one string,
Yeah.
it affects the whole thing.
It is. It's like a web, like a spider web. You touch one part of it and the whole thing vibrates.
Okay. And Chapter 7, it doesn't stop there. It breaks down a bunch of tasks
Yeah.
that fall under requirements analysis and design definition, specify and model requirements, verify requirements, all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, don't let all those terms intimidate you. Just think of each task as a step-by-step guide to tackling a specific aspect of requirements analysis and design.
So let's zoom in on one of those tasks.
Okay.
Specify and model requirements.
All right.
And this one's all about, like, taking that messy information you gather during elicitation
Right.
and transforming it into clear, concise, actionable requirements.
Exactly. Like taking a jungle pile of puzzle pieces and assembling them into a clear picture of what the solution needs to achieve. You're analyzing, representing, and refining those requirements to make sure they're ready to guide that design and development.
And like any good blueprint, this task involves certain specific elements. So for specify and model requirements, you've got things like analyze requirements, represent requirements and attributes, and implement the appropriate levels of abstraction.
Let's unpack that represent requirements and attributes for a second.
Okay.
Because remember, not all stakeholders speak the same language. So executives, they might need that high-level overview, while developers might crave those detailed specs. So this element is about using different techniques like matrices, diagrams, plain language descriptions to tailor the representation of requirements to each audience.
Okay, so it's like having different versions of the same blueprint.
Exactly.
Okay.
And Chapter 7 provides this detailed guidance for each task.
Cool.
It's a gold mine of practical information.
Okay, let's explore another one.
All right.
Verify requirements, making sure they're top-notch before moving on to the next stage.
Yeah, quality control. It's like having a meticulous inspector examine every detail of your blueprint, looking for flaws or inconsistencies.
So what are we checking for specifically?
Completeness, consistency, feasibility, testability. For example, is each requirement atomic?
Atomic.
Meaning it's self-contained, it can be understood on its own.
Okay.
Does it align with other requirements? Does it align with the project goals? Can it be tested and verified?
Okay.
You're looking for gaps, overlaps, or conflicts that could cause problems down the line.
Okay, so Chapter 7 provides some helpful tools for this process.
Yes, it does.
It has characteristics of requirements and designs quality, and verification activities checklists.
They give you that structure, those checklists, those quality characteristics.
Yeah.
So you can systematically evaluate each requirement, making sure it meets those standards before you move on to actually building the solution.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Good stuff.
Now it's time to look at validate requirements.
Okay.
We're not just checking for technical accuracy here.
No.
We're checking for strategic alignment.
Right. It's like you're building a building, making sure that the blueprint not just creates a building that's structurally sound, but also serves its intended purpose.
Right.
You're asking, does this requirement actually contribute to those business objectives?
Okay.
Will implementing this requirement truly benefit those stakeholders?
Got it.
You might need to weigh the value of a requirement against its cost and complexity. It's about making sure you're building something that truly adds value.
Okay, and to guide you through this process, the chapter provides some key elements. Identify assumptions, define measurable evaluation criteria, and evaluate alignment with solution scope.
Okay, let's look at identify assumptions for a second.
Okay.
Because those are like hidden landmines that could blow your project off course.
Okay.
For example, you might be assuming a certain technology will be available.
Right.
Or that a key stakeholder group will be readily available to provide input.
Yeah.
So by identifying those assumptions up front, you can assess the risk they pose and develop backup plans.
So it's kind of like when they're building a house. They always tell you to check the foundation.
Exactly. Check the foundation before you build those upper floors.
Yeah, okay. And once you've identified those assumptions, you need to define measurable evaluation criteria.
Right. Set those benchmarks to determine if the solution actually meets the requirements and delivers the value.
So instead of just saying, we want the system to be user-friendly, you're defining what user-friendly actually means.
Exactly. And in measurable terms.
Okay.
Maybe it's a certain task completion time or a specific level of user satisfaction.
Got it. Okay, and finally, we have evaluate alignment with solution scope. This is where you're ensuring that those validated requirements actually fit within the boundaries that you've set for the project.
Right. We don't want to end up building a mansion when the client only asks for a cozy cottage.
Right. Okay. Moving right along, in Chapter 7, we come to define requirements architecture. Now, this sounds pretty high level.
It is. It's about creating that big picture framework for your requirements.
Okay.
Making sure they're organized logically and support those overarching business objectives. It's like creating a master plan for your city, ensuring that all the different districts and infrastructure are all working together seamlessly.
Okay. And to help you build that master plan, the chapter outlines some elements. Requirements, viewpoints and views, template architectures, completeness,
Yeah.
and more.
Okay, well, let's look at requirements, viewpoints, and views for a second.
Okay.
Because remember, different stakeholders come from different walks of life.
Yeah.
They have their own perspectives, their own needs. A customer will have a very different view of the solution compared to, say, a developer.
Right.
So this is about recognizing those different viewpoints
Okay.
and creating those representations of the requirements that resonate with each audience.
So it's like having different maps of the same city,
Exactly.
each one highlighting features that are relevant to a particular group of people.
Yeah. And those template architectures, they're really helpful because they provide you with pre-built frameworks
Right.
that can be adapted to your specific project, which save you time and ensures consistency, like having a set of blueprint templates that you can customize.
And of course, we want to make sure everything is complete.
Yes,
No requirement left behind.
completeness is key. You're checking for gaps, inconsistencies, contradictions between those requirements, making sure that your architectural plan is
Yeah.
truly comprehensive and well integrated.
All right, next we have define design options. So this is where we start exploring different paths to building that solution, right?
It is. Think of it as the architect presenting different blueprints for a house,
Okay.
each with its pros, cons, and
Yeah.
different stylistic choices. You're brainstorming possibilities, evaluating those trade-offs,
Right.
and recommending the best path forward based on those specific needs and constraints of the project.
Okay, so Chapter 7 provides 4 elements to guide you through this process.
Mm-hmm.
Define solution approaches, identify improvement opportunities,
Yeah.
requirements allocation, and describe design options.
Okay, so let's dig into defined solution approaches for a second.
Okay.
This is where you're deciding whether to build the solution from scratch,
Okay.
buy an existing product off the shelf, or maybe go for a hybrid approach.
Right.
Each option has its implications, for cost, time, complexity. It's like choosing whether to custom build your dream house, buy a prefabricated one, or renovate an existing structure to fit your vision.
Got it. Okay, and while you're exploring those design options, don't forget to identify improvement opportunities.
Yes, this is where you put on your innovation hat.
Yeah.
You're not just meeting those stated requirements, but you're also looking for ways to enhance that solution.
Okay.
Maybe streamline a process, improve data accuracy,
Right.
or even uncover those new business opportunities. It's like adding those extra bells and whistles that elevate your house from just functional to fabulous.
Right. And once you've fleshed out those design options, then you need to allocate those requirements to specific parts of the solution.
Exactly, and that's requirements allocation.
Okay.
You're assigning specific functionalities to different components, whether it's a software application, a business process, even user training materials. It's like deciding which rooms in your house
Right.
will serve which purpose and what furniture goes where.
Okay. And finally, you have describe design options, where you create those detailed specifications, diagrams, even mock-ups
Yeah.
to show how those choices will actually work.
It's like creating those 3D renderings of your house.
Yeah.
So everyone can visualize that final product and provide feedback before you start laying those bricks and mortar.
Okay, so that brings us to the final task in Chapter 7,
Okay.
analyze potential value and recommend solution.
All right, so this is where you put all the pieces together.
Yeah, we're at the end,
You've explored those design options, you've assessed their feasibility,
right?
and now it's time to weigh those pros and cons and recommend that best course of action. You're considering cost, benefits, risks, feasibility.
Okay,
It's like presenting the client with your final recommendation for their dream home,
got it.
backed by that solid analysis and justification.
Okay, so to guide you through that recommendation, Chapter 7 outlines some elements. Expected benefits, expected costs, determine value,
Yeah.
and assess design options and recommend solution.
Okay, let's break those down. Expected benefits.
Okay.
This is where you quantify those positive outcomes the solution is intended to deliver.
Okay,
Things like increased revenue,
right.
improved customer satisfaction, even reduced operational costs. You're painting that picture
Okay.
of how this solution will make a tangible difference.
So it's not just about building something.
No.
It's about building something that delivers measurable value.
Exactly. And those expected costs encompass all those expenses associated with making that solution a reality.
Okay.
development, deployment, training, ongoing maintenance.
So you're looking at the whole picture, not just the upfront.
Right, that total cost of ownership.
Okay, and then you bring those two pieces together
Yeah.
in determined value.
Exactly. You're comparing those expected benefits against the expected costs.
Right.
Essentially calculating that return on investment.
Okay.
Is that potential return worth those upfront and ongoing expenses?
It's like deciding whether that dream house is actually worth the price tag.
Exactly.
Okay.
And finally, you take all that information, the benefits, the costs, the risks, feasibility, and bring it all together to assess design options and recommend solution.
Okay.
This is where you present your final recommendation to the client, justifying your choice based on that thorough analysis
Okay.
and a deep understanding of their needs and those project constraints.
Wow, that was quite a journey through Chapter 7. Don't feel like you have to memorize every single detail, though.
No, the key is to grasp those underlying concepts and see how they play out in the real world.
Right, okay.
So don't get bogged down in the minutia. Focus on those key takeaways that will guide you through your exam and your future BA work.
Okay. Ready for Chapter 5?
Hit me.
Okay. Chapter 5, this one focuses on requirements life cycle management.
Okay.
So it's recognizing that requirements are living, breathing things.
Yes.
And that they need to be nurtured and guided throughout their lifespan.
It's an ongoing process. Chapter 5 provides those tools and techniques to effectively manage that evolution of requirements.
Okay. And Chapter 5 kicks off, you're going to recognize the Business Analysis Core Concept Model, BACCM.
There we go again.
Changes, needs, solutions, stakeholders, value, and contexts.
Those 6 key terms are back.
They're back.
To really underscore how interconnected everything is.
Okay.
So think about how those changing stakeholder needs might lead to a reevaluation of the solution's value.
Yeah.
Or how a shift in a project's context could impact the prioritization of those requirements. Keep those connections in mind as you go through Chapter 5.
So this chapter outlines 5 key tasks for managing that life cycle.
Okay.
Trace requirements, maintain requirements, prioritize requirements, assess requirements changes, and approve requirements. It's like a roadmap to keep your requirements on track.
And the order of those tasks is significant.
Okay.
So you begin by tracing those relationships, ensuring to understand their origins, their connections.
Okay.
Then you shift to maintaining their accuracy, their consistency.
Right.
Next comes prioritization. Then you assess the impact of those proposed changes.
Right.
And finally, you formalize the agreement through a thorough approval process.
All right, so let's break down the first task, trace requirements. It sounds a little bit like detective work.
It is. You're essentially creating a family tree for your requirements,
Okay.
tracing their lineage back to their source, and mapping out their relationships with other elements of the project.
Okay.
So this web of traceability, as the JBOK guide calls it,
Right.
links requirements to business objectives, stakeholder needs, design components, test cases, even other requirements.
So it's like, when you see those conspiracy theory boards
Yes.
and they have all the strings and photos?
That's a great analogy.
Okay.
Because just like those boards help investigators uncover hidden connections,
Yeah.
a traceability matrix helps you understand the origins, the dependencies, and the potential impacts
Right.
of your requirements. It's a powerful tool for impact analysis, change management, and clear communication.
Okay. The chapter highlights 3 key elements for effective requirements tracing: level of formality, relationships, and traceability repository. So let's start with level of formality.
Okay.
This one determines how rigorously you're going to document those links.
Right. It can range from those informal notes and sketches to very structured matrices and diagrams,
Okay.
depending on the project, depending on your organization's standards. For example, a small project might just use a simple spreadsheet to track those connections, whereas a more complex project might require a dedicated software tool.
Okay, so it's about tailoring your approach.
Exactly.
Okay. And then we have relationships. So this defines those different types of connections you can establish between requirements and other project artifacts. And the BABOK guide outlines some standard types like derive, depends, satisfy,
Right.
and validate. Can you give us some real-world examples of those types?
Absolutely. Let's say you're working on a project to develop a new mobile banking app.
Okay.
Okay, so a functional requirement like allow users to transfer funds between accounts might
Yeah.
be derived from a business requirement to provide customers with convenient self-service options.
So the functional requirement is like a child of the
Yes.
business requirement.
Exactly. Now, let's say you also have a requirement to generate monthly account statements.
Okay,
This requirement might depend on a requirement to track all account transactions
got it.
because you need that transaction data to
Right.
generate those statements accurately.
It's a chain reaction.
Exactly. One requirement sets off another.
Okay.
Now, imagine you have a design element in your app
Okay.
that allows users to view their account balance with a single tap.
Mm-hmm.
This design element might satisfy a requirement for easy access to account information.
Right.
Okay? So the design is fulfilling that requirement.
Got it. Got it. Okay.
And finally, you might have a test case
Okay.
that checks whether users can successfully transfer funds between accounts. This test case would then validate the requirement for fund transfers.
Okay. So the test case is like the quality control inspector, making sure that requirement is actually doing what it's supposed to be doing.
Exactly. And by defining these different types of relationships, you're creating this more comprehensive and meaningful traceability map.
Right.
It's like having a detailed blueprint that shows not only the components of your solution, but also how they're connected, how they're interdependent.
Got it. And finally, we have traceability repository,
Right.
which is just a fancy way of saying where you're keeping this information.
It is. It could be a simple spreadsheet, a database,
Okay.
or a dedicated software tool. The key is to have that central location where everyone can access and update the traceability information.
Right. It's like that master control panel.
Exactly.
Okay. On to the next task. Maintain requirements.
All right.
So this sounds a little bit like housework, doesn't it?
It does. It's like ongoing housekeeping for your requirements.
Yeah.
Continuously checking for those dust bunnies, making sure everything is fresh, accurate, and in its proper place.
So you're constantly reviewing, updating,
Yes.
refining those requirements to make sure they stay relevant.
Exactly. Keep them fresh.
Yeah. So the Baybot Guide breaks this down into 3 elements. Maintain requirements, maintain attributes,
Mm-hmm.
and reusing requirements.
Okay.
So let's start with maintain requirements,
Right.
which emphasizes this ongoing process of reviewing and updating as new information comes out. Priorities shift.
Right. So you're constantly checking for inconsistencies, ambiguities, outdated information, or maybe even conflicts between those requirements.
Right.
So let's say you're working on that mobile banking app.
Yeah.
And a stakeholder requests a change to a requirement. Maybe they want to add a new feature for bill payments.
Okay.
You need to assess the impact of that change, make those updates to the requirement, and ensure that all related documentation is updated.
So you're keeping those requirements aligned with, as things evolve, as the project evolves?
Exactly, yeah. And then we have maintain attributes.
Okay.
Remember, each requirement has a set of attributes
Right.
that provide additional context, additional information.
Okay.
This might include the priority level, the source, the target release,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even the risks or the stakeholders who are impacted.
So you're keeping those tags up to date.
Yes.
So you have a complete picture of each requirement.
Exactly. And then finally, reusing requirements.
Okay.
Why reinvent the wheel? This encourages you to leverage existing requirements, maybe from previous projects
Okay.
or other sources within your organization.
Okay, so build on what you already have.
Exactly, yeah. So for example, you're developing that mobile banking app, you might be able to reuse some of the requirements from a previous project that involved online banking.
Okay, cool. All right, let's move on to prioritize requirements,
All right?
the third task in Chapter 5.
Okay.
This is where we figure out which requirements are the VIPs, the ones that need to be tackled first.
Right. Prioritization is crucial because in the real world, you rarely have the time or the budget to implement every single requirement. You have to make strategic choices
Right.
about where to focus those efforts. So you're considering value, urgency, the risk associated with each requirement.
So we're juggling. Okay, the chapter outlines 3 elements
Yeah.
to help you with this process. Basis for prioritization, challenges of prioritization, and continual prioritization.
Okay, so let's talk about basis for prioritization first.
Okay.
This is all about the criteria you're going to use to rank those requirements.
Okay.
So you might consider benefit, penalty, costs, risk, dependencies, time sensitivities, stability, regulatory compliance.
So no one right answer.
Exactly.
It depends on the project.
Exactly. No one size fits all, but the key is to have a consistent framework for making those decisions.
Okay. And then we have challenges of prioritization.
Right.
Because, well, it's not always easy.
No, it's not. Stakeholders have different priorities. What's important to one might not be important to another.
Right.
Information might be incomplete.
Okay.
And priorities might shift as the project evolves.
So we just have to roll with it. Okay. And then the final element,
Yeah.
continual prioritization. So it's not a one-time thing.
No.
It's ongoing.
It's continual. You need to revisit those priorities throughout the project.
As things change. Okay. On to task number 4, assess requirements changes.
Okay.
Well, change is inevitable in any project, right?
It is, but it needs to be managed carefully. This task is about ensuring that any proposed changes to those requirements are thoroughly evaluated.
Okay.
You're considering the benefits, the costs, the risks, the feasibility of each change, and making recommendations about whether to proceed.
Okay, so we're like the gatekeeper.
You're the change management gatekeeper.
Okay. The chapter highlights 3 key elements for change assessment: assessment formality, impact analysis, and impact resolution.
All right, let's look at assessment formality for a moment.
Okay.
This is how rigorously you're going to evaluate those proposed changes. A minor tweak might only need a quick review, an informal approval, while a major overhaul could require a detailed impact analysis, risk assessment, formal sign-off.
Okay.
So you're tailoring your approach.
So not being bureaucratic, just being smart.
Exactly. And then there's impact analysis.
Okay.
This is where you really roll up your sleeves and systematically assess how that change will ripple through the project.
Okay.
You're considering the impact on the scope, the schedule, the budget, resources, even those risks and dependencies. You're looking at the potential impact on other requirements, other project artifacts. It's like mapping out those domino effects.
Right. Okay.
And the goal is to really gain that holistic understanding before making that decision.
And once you've assessed those impacts, it's time for impact resolution.
Right.
So what happens then?
Well, this is where you develop strategies to address those identified impacts. If the change is approved, you might need to adjust the scope, the schedule, the budget, or resources. If the change is rejected, you need to communicate that decision, explain your rationale, and maybe explore alternative solutions. It's about managing those consequences effectively.
So being proactive and having a plan in place.
Exactly. You're steering the ship through those choppy waters of change.
All right. On to the final task in Chapter 5, approve requirements. This is where we get the official stamp of approval, the green light to move forward.
It is. It's the culmination of all that hard work.
Okay.
You've gathered those requirements, you've analyzed them, you've refined them, you've prioritized them, assessed the impact of any changes. Now it's time to formalize the agreement and move forward.
Okay. The chapter outlines 4 elements that are crucial for this process. Understand stakeholder roles, conflict and issue management, gain consensus, and track and communicate approval.
Okay, so let's look at understand stakeholder roles.
Okay.
This is about knowing who needs to be at that approval table, what their level of authority is, and what their interests and concerns might be. You need to identify those decision makers, make sure they have the information they need, and be mindful of any potential conflicts of interest.
So you're doing your homework. Okay. And then there's conflict and issue management.
Yes, because disagreements happen.
Yeah, because people are people.
Right. They might have different viewpoints on the requirements, the priorities, even the solutions.
Right.
So you need to step into the role of mediator.
Right.
Facilitate constructive dialogue, find that common ground, and resolve those conflicts.
So you're the negotiator, the peacemaker.
Exactly. You're bringing those folks together, finding those win-win solutions, and ensuring those requirements have that broad support.
Next up, we have gain consensus. So this sounds like we want everyone to agree.
Yes, you're building alignment, a shared understanding.
Okay.
It's about making sure that everyone feels heard, their concerns are addressed, and they're ultimately on board with that final decision.
So it's not just about checking boxes, it's about building those relationships.
Exactly. And that brings us to that final element, track and communicate approval.
Okay.
This is all about transparency, accountability.
Okay.
So you're documenting those decisions, keeping a clear record of who signed off on what, when, and why. You're also communicating those approved requirements to all those relevant parties, ensuring everyone has the latest information. There are no surprises.
So it's closing the loop and keeping everyone in the loop.
Exactly.
Wow. Chapters 5 and 7 were a lot. They provided a comprehensive framework for managing that entire requirements lifecycle.
They really did.
But again, you don't need to memorize every single detail.
No, not at all. The key is to grasp those concepts, see how they play out in the real world.
Right.
So don't get bogged down in the minutia. Focus on those key takeaways that will guide you.
Okay, so you've taken this deep dive, and you've even tackled those tricky pop quiz questions. You're definitely on the right track.
You are.
to acing your exam.
Remember, you've come so far in this prep course.
Mm-hmm.
You've absorbed so much knowledge.
Right.
And you're starting to see how all the pieces of that business analysis puzzle fit together.
Okay, so let's get practical for a minute.
Okay.
Let's open that techniques map, all KA student version.xl's spreadsheet.
Yes, let's get into the tools.
Yeah, and explore those specific techniques.
This is like opening a treasure chest of BA techniques, each one designed to help you elicit, analyze, document, and manage those requirements.
And it's organized by knowledge area, so it's easy to find the right tool.
Exactly. You know, each technique is described in detail. It tells you the purpose and the inputs, the outputs, the strengths, the weaknesses.
Right.
It even gives you examples.
Okay. So it's like a BA Swiss Army knife.
It is. It's your BA toolbox. And you can even tailor it to your specific needs.
Yeah.
As you gain experience, add your own notes, your own examples, new techniques you come across. Make it your own.
All right, let's try out a few of these tools. So we'll start with the knowledge area of elicitation and collaboration. This is all about gathering information.
Yeah, the golden nuggets of information.
Right. Understanding their needs.
It's all about those stakeholders.
Right.
Understanding their needs, building those relationships, asking those insightful questions, and truly listening to what they have to say.
Okay, and the spreadsheet lists a variety of techniques for effective elicitation. Brainstorming, document analysis, focus groups, interviews, observation, prototyping, surveys, and workshops.
So many options.
There are a lot. But each technique has its own strengths.
Yeah.
And weaknesses, right? Just like those different tools in your Swiss Army knife.
Right. You wouldn't use a screwdriver to cut a piece of paper.
Right, exactly.
So you choose the right tool for the job.
Okay.
For instance, let's say you're trying to gather high-level ideas for a new product. Brainstorming with a group can be great.
Okay.
But if you're trying to understand the detailed workflow of a process, document analysis, or even observing those employees in action might be more effective.
Right.
And sometimes you combine those techniques. Let's say you're working on a project to improve customer service.
Okay.
You might start by conducting interviews to gather those personal perspectives, and then hold a workshop to bring those stakeholders together, facilitate that group discussion, and build consensus around those key needs.
So it's about having a diverse toolkit.
Yes.
And knowing when to use each tool.
Exactly. Okay, let's move on to the knowledge area of requirements analysis and design definition.
Okay, this sounds a bit more technical.
It is a bit more technical,
Okay.
but it's incredibly important. This is about transforming those elicited requirements into clear, concise, actionable specifications.
Right.
It's about taking those rough sketches and turning them into detailed blueprints.
So the spreadsheet lists a variety of techniques for this, like business rules analysis, data modeling, decision analysis, process modeling, scope modeling, and those user stories. Expert speaker.
And those user stories.
It's a whole different section of your BA Swiss Army knife.
It is. So let's try out a few of those tools. Imagine you're working on a project to automate a complex business process, something like loan approvals.
Okay.
Business rules analysis would be crucial here. You'd need to identify and document all those rules that govern that approval process.
Okay.
Things like credit score thresholds, debt-to-income ratios, loan amount limits.
So you're creating the rule book.
You are.
That the automated system's going to follow.
Exactly. Now, let's say you're working on a data-intensive project, something like building a customer relationship management system, you know, a CRM.
Okay.
Data modeling would be your go-to there.
Okay.
You're creating that visual representation of all that customer data.
Right.
Contact info, purchase history, all those interactions, making sure it's organized logically so it can be easily accessed and analyzed.
So it's like creating a visual map of all that data.
Exactly. And if you're embracing that agile world, those user stories are your best friend.
Okay.
They capture those individual pieces of functionality from that user's perspective, making those requirements easier to understand and easier to prioritize.
So it's about choosing the right tool for the job.
It is.
Okay, cool. Now let's move on to the knowledge area of requirements life cycle management. So this is where we put on our project manager hats.
Kind of, yeah. This knowledge area is about ensuring those requirements are managed throughout the entire project lifecycle, from the very beginning to the end and beyond.
Okay.
It's about maintaining consistency, traceability, control over those requirements.
So we're herding the cats.
We are, keeping them all in line.
Okay. And this is important because...
Oh, it's crucial because if you don't manage them well, it can lead to confusion, miscommunication, costly rework, and project delays.
Okay, so how do we go about managing and communicating these requirements effectively?
Well, the first step is choosing the right tool, whether it's a simple spreadsheet, a dedicated requirements management tool, or even a collaborative platform like a wiki.
So finding the right tool for the job.
Exactly. And once you have that tool in place, you need to establish a process for documenting, versioning, and tracking those changes. Who has the authority to make changes, how those changes are reviewed and approved, and how they're communicated to everyone.
So we're preventing unauthorized changes. We're making sure everyone's working from the latest version.
Exactly. And of course, you need to communicate those requirements to all the stakeholders involved.
Okay.
You're tailoring your communication to the specific needs of each audience. Executives might need that high-level overview, while developers need those detailed specifications.
So use different formats, presentations, documents, diagrams.
Exactly. Find that right way to convey the information so everyone understands.
Okay, so let's talk about baselining. Okay, we talked about this a little bit before. It's about creating that snapshot of the requirements, right?
It is. It's like taking a picture of them and saying, this is the official version.
Okay.
Any changes after the baseline is established have to go through that formal change control process.
Right, so we carefully evaluate the proposed changes, make sure everything's documented and communicated properly.
Exactly. It helps you maintain that control, prevent those unauthorized changes.
Right. Okay, so let's talk about collaboration a little bit.
Yeah, collaboration is key.
It seems like that's a theme throughout this whole process.
It is. Business analysis is a collaborative endeavor. You're working with all these stakeholders, each with their own perspectives and priorities.
Right, so we need to build those relationships, keep those lines of communication open, work together.
Exactly. And effective collaboration requires strong communication skills, those active listening skills, and the ability to build consensus and resolve conflict.
Right. So what are some techniques we can use for effective collaboration?
Well, one helpful technique is to hold regular meetings or workshops.
Okay.
Bring those stakeholders together to discuss the requirements, gather feedback, and make decisions.
Okay, so provide a structured place for communication and collaboration.
Exactly. It allows them to voice their perspectives and feel like they're part of the process.
Right, okay.
It's also important to establish clear roles and responsibilities for each stakeholder.
Right, so everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing.
Exactly. So everyone understands their role, their contributions, and their decision-making authority. Another helpful technique is to use visual aids.
Okay.
Things like diagrams, mock-ups, even prototypes to communicate those requirements and facilitate discussion.
Yeah, because visuals can be really helpful.
They can. They help people understand complex concepts more easily.
Right.
And they provide that common language for discussion.
Okay. And finally, document the decisions and make sure everyone knows what those decisions are.
Exactly. Transparency and accountability.
Okay. So let's move on to the final stage of the business analysis process, solution assessment and validation. So this is where we put everything to the test.
It is. It's time to evaluate that implemented solution to ensure it meets the requirements and delivers the intended value.
So it's not just about building it, it's about making sure it works.
Exactly. It's about confirming the project achieved those objectives.
Okay.
And it involves gathering feedback from stakeholders, analyzing data, and measuring those results.
Okay.
So you're not just relying on anecdotal evidence or gut feelings.
Right.
You're using data to make those decisions.
Okay. So one common approach is to conduct user acceptance testing.
Yes. UAT. This is where you have those real users test the solution in a realistic environment.
So they're actually using the system. Okay.
Exactly. This helps you uncover usability issues, identify areas for improvement, and ensure it meets the needs of those who will be using it every day.
And we can also gather feedback through surveys and interviews.
Absolutely. Those techniques allow you to gather quantitative and qualitative data on those user experiences, identify areas for improvement, and confirm the solution is delivering value. And don't forget those metrics and TPIs.
Right. We need to track those key metrics.
Exactly. User adoption rates, error rates, customer satisfaction, any relevant measures that show us how the solution is performing.
So we're looking at the data. Okay, so let's wrap this up.
Okay.
Let's talk about the importance of continuous improvement.
Yes, because the learning never stops.
Right.
The business world is always changing. Technology is evolving.
Right.
Stakeholder needs are shifting.
So we can't just assume what worked before will work again.
Exactly. Continuous improvement is about always seeking way to get better, to improve our processes, our tools, our skills.
So we're always learning, always growing.
Exactly. Embracing that growth mindset, refining our skills, and delivering more value.
Okay. So that was our deep dive into business analysis. We explored the concepts, the tools, the techniques, and the challenges.
We covered a lot of ground.
We did. We talked about stakeholder needs, managing requirements, collaborating effectively, and continuously improving.
It's all part of the exciting world of business analysis.
It is. So we hope you found this deep dive helpful. And remember, the journey of a business analyst is one of continuous learning and growth. Embrace those challenges, stay curious, and keep exploring.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Until next time, keep analyzing, keep collaborating.
And keep making a difference.
That's right.